The more knobs I have to fiddle with, the higher the odds that I'm going to interrupt my investing process at some point. Versus I think if my investment strategy is very simple, there's like no knobs to fiddle with. It's just the Vanguard total stock market. And it's just so brainless. That's it. I think that gives me a higher chance of sticking with it for 50 years. And if I can stick with something for 50 years, compounding is going to go nuts. That's all it is. Like, all investing is just money and time. And the time is the most important part of that equation. So all I want to focus on is maximizing time. It's not maximizing annual returns. How can I stay here for 50 years? And I'm going to be able to do that with as much simplicity as I can.
Just the difference between whether you want to do it or not makes all the difference in the world.
100%.
There's this great story about Roosevelt where his mom was talking about, I think FDR was like 10 years old at the time. And he complained to his mom that he was unhappy in life because his entire day was structured in a really strict regimen. At 7 a.m. you do this, at 8 a.m. you do that. And he came to his mom and he said, all these rules make me unhappy. So his mom said, okay, for one day you can do whatever you want. It's all up to you. And his mom wrote in her diary that night that during that day when FDR could do anything he wanted, he followed his old routine. He did the same. He ate at 7 a.m. and then he did his homework at 8 a.m. But just the fact that he was doing that on his own will rather than someone telling him to do it made him feel better. So it's like people don't know what to do. And even if they get to do if they're doing what they want to do on their own terms, they still might do the same thing, but they're doing it on their own terms.
You go on and someone, the guy wearing a nice suit says, you should buy Netflix stock. Well, who is that advice for? Is that for a 19-year-old day trader? Is that for a 90-year-old widow on a fixed income? Because let's not pretend that those people are the same. So when someone says you should buy this, no, when we all play different games, then you have advice that is good for one person that will be disastrous for another. And I think that, again, it's such an obvious, simple point, but it goes overlooked all the time. Maybe even the majority of bad investing behavior is caused by people who are taking cues from people who are playing a different game than them. And best things that's so critical for any investor to do is just define the game that they're playing and make sure that the information and the cues that they take that are going to dictate their behavior are only relevant to your personal game. What really matters is just how you respond 1% of the time. 99% of investing is really boring. But what you do 1% of the time will change your life. Whether that's not panicking during a crisis, whether it's buying more in a crisis, whether it's not getting caught up in the final moments of a massive bubble, how you respond a fraction of the time is going to account for the majority of your returns over time.
I think we very often think that wealth is just how much money you make. And there's a lot of evidence that that's not it. It's a personal lifestyle choice more than it is anything to do with the number of zeros in your annual income. It's less how much money you make or what your investment returns are, and more just the decisions that you make about how you're going to spend your money and what you value in life. Do you value a big car? Do you value fancy clothes? Do you value jewelry? I would rather save money to build wealth. And that wealth that you save is it's what people don't see. So it's wealth is the Ferrari that you did not buy. It's the first class seat that you didn't buy. And I think that's of course that's what it is. Wealth is what you don't spend. It's the wealth, it's the money that you saved up.
How you behaved in March of 2020 when the world was falling apart will have more impact on your investment and returns than all of your behavior in the previous decade combined. If you were to look at your 20-year results as investors, the most important things that would matter is how did you behave during the dot-com bust? How did you behave in 2008? And how did you behave in March of 2020? Those three little punctuated moments matter more than everything else combined. And if you are one of the investors who panicked last March and sold everything in March of 2020, that's a scar on your net worth that will be with you for the rest of your life. Good investing is not about what you know. It's not about how smart you are or where you went to school or how sophisticated the Excel model you have is. Good investing is overwhelmingly just about how you behave. It's about your relationship with greed and fear and your ability to take a long-term mindset and who you trust, how gullible you are, those kind of things. And to me, the most important part is that Behavior is hard to teach, even to someone who's very smart. You can teach them calculus and you can teach them data analysis. You can teach them how to read a balance sheet, but you can't teach people how to be patient. It's just some people have it and some people don't. That can be disheartening to hear, but I think it's really true. I don't think there's much evidence that people who are extremely intelligent are also going to be patient investors, or the opposite. The people who don't have a lot of training and sophistication, those people can be patient, very successful investors. And I think it's just very easy to overlook that in this industry, the disconnect between behavior and intelligence.
So much of building wealth is just the lifestyle that you choose to lead. And this is true at all incomes groups, but living below your means is everything at any income group, at any income level. Choosing to live below your means is the single most important thing to do to build wealth. And a lot of what that is, of what living below your means is just suppressing your ego. To say, I could spend X, I could spend 10, but I'm only going to spend 8. And the difference between the two is like my ego going down. Like, I could have a nicer car, but I'm not going to do it. I could have more clothes, but no, I'm not going to do it. It's that gap that you're pushing against that's really meaningful. The point that I made recently about where you really get a benefit from exercising is after you exercise and you're very hungry because you just burned 500 calories and saying, I'm not going to replace those calories with a cheeseburger. My body is saying, hey, you're hungry? Chris, you're hungry because you just exercised. Go eat a cheeseburger. And you're saying, no, I'm going to suppress that hunger. That's the benefit of exercise. It's the suppressing that really helps you.
Even though you feel like you've earned it, right? You feel like you've earned the cheeseburger. You feel like you've earned the money. The money is in your account. I worked hard for this money. I should be able to spend.
But you have to willingly say, I could and I deserve it, but I'm not going to. And it's not the earning. It's that push down that is what wealth is. And that, to me, I think is really important. Bill Gates had a quote. I heard him say this a long time ago. It was something to the effect of, now that he's the richest man in the world, like his only money thought was not losing what he had. It was not growing more. He already has more than he could have. It was just not losing it. And how many people who are thinking about Bill Gates' wealth, his money mind frame, think that he's sitting at home worried about losing what he has? He's got more than, like, it's absurd, but that's what goes through people's heads. And I think that it's a really common thing that comes up when you hear very wealthy people talk about the psychology of their own money. Being paranoid about losing what they have is a big thing that comes up. And that's a stress that is hard. You know, of course, there's a big point of this where it's like, boo-hoo. You know.
Yeah, there's someone who's living on the poverty line that's like, oh yeah, it sounds really hard.
Exactly. But there's also a sense, and this is not a popular statement, but first world problems are real problems. Like, anxiety in your head is real no matter how wealthy or how absurd it looks to someone else. Anxiety is real.
The idea of success being a lousy teacher, as Bill Gates says, is that success tends to give you an idea that you know what you're doing and that you know how the world works. Being right is the enemy of staying right. Once you have confidence that you know what you're doing, you start locking on to strategies and worldviews and grasping them really tight. They become part of your identity. And then all of a sudden, you're not able to adapt. You're not willing to adapt. You get fat and happy. You get lazy once you're so successful. Universal human condition. That success brings a degree of laziness. And the companies and the people who are able to fight that are the unique ones. Those are the standouts.
Applies to a lot of us too, because there are people who make $40,000 a year that save a lot of it, and they're wealthy. And there are people who make $5 million a year that spend $6 million a year, and they are on the razor's edge of poverty. Rich has to do with your income, but wealth has to do with your savings rate. And savings rate is totally independent of your richness, of your annual income. And we've seen this in a big way in the last decade when the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early movement, have people who are making 40, 50 grand a year, sometimes more, 100, 200 grand a year. But they live a very low-key lifestyle and they save 50% of it or more. And those are people whose incomes are not that impressive, but they're wealthy.
When I was in college, I was a valet at a high-end hotel in Los Angeles, and there were people coming in Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and it dawned on me one day that when those cars pulled in, never once did I look at the driver and say, that guy's cool. What I did is I imagined myself as a driver, and I thought people would think I'm cool. That was my first kind of light bulb into how wealth works, that everyone thinks that they want to be the driver, but no one actually is paying attention to the driver. They're imagining themselves. People think about themselves way more than they think about other people. But we all think that everyone's looking at us. I think that's like a universal thing. Everyone thinks like, oh, this person's looking at me, they're impressed with me. By and large, they're not. They're thinking about themselves and how other people might want to be impressed with them.